So I just wanted to make this video. Basically what we're dealing with here is a stuck wrist pin on a 400ex. It seems like I've dealt with this more on 400ex's than any other bike, but for any bike nevertheless. If you're dealing with this issue, I'm going to give you some tips on your best chance to get it out. I know if you look into the forums, there's not really a whole lot of help. Those wrist pin removal tools online, they're cheap. They strip out, they break. I have not had any luck with them. I've tried using an air hammer on this one, have not had any luck there. You don't really want to beat on the side of it because you'll put side load on that crankshaft and you could bend the crankshaft that way. Normally that's what you would do, is just a couple taps and it should just pop out, but this is for people whose wrist pin is like stuck. Now I've probably done this a good 10-15 times on 400s, and some are easier than others. I would say this is probably the hardest one I've dealt with so far, and I've dealt with some pretty hard ones. Obviously you're going to want a torch, propane torch. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, but if you get to the point where I'm at, like where it's really in there, heat is going to be your biggest helper with this. Initially, what has worked for me in the past, I started with is some 3/8 all thread or threaded rod. And so basically you can see kind of the setup that I'm using now, and that'll give you an idea. So obviously you can use something else other than a socket. I just happen to be using a 3/4 inch drive socket to press up against here, but you can use pretty much anything that's big enough so that when that wrist pin comes out, it has something to go into, because you can put a lot of things up against this, but when you're trying to push that wrist pin out and it's hitting against whatever it is that you have against here, it's not going to work. You're just going to be fighting against yourself. So I'm using a 3/4 inch drive socket. It is what size? A 1/8 socket. The big thing with doing this is the sockets that you're going to be using are probably going to be 1/2 inch, at least. A 1/2 inch was it 1 1/8 size socket would work. Just pretty much anything that's bigger than this wrist pin hole that can also push against this piston, and it has to have a hole big enough for this thread to go into. Now the socket I'm using on this side is a 13mm 1/2 inch drive socket. Your socket might be, but like for this one, it was big enough to fit through. Now, since this rod didn't work and it was stripping out the nuts and I bent, I upgraded to a 7/16 all thread rod, and then I'm using some grade 8 nuts on that. And so I had to drill out my 13mm, the hole that's in the center of it, just a little bit bigger, not very much, so I could fit this threaded rod through, but you get the idea. And I'm also using this piece of scrap metal here just to push against this because the nut isn't big enough for the opening hole there. And it'll just pull the nut in. I tried using washers and it was just crushing the washers. And you could see this is probably about I don't know, like an 1/8 inch piece of steel, and you could see that it's starting to cave in it as well. But it is coming slowly but surely. I don't know if you guys can see that in there. Let me try to turn on my flash. But it's hard to see. If you see that little spot of white right there, that is the wrist pin starting to come out. And you can see, I think that's probably corrosion. And it's kind of became fused with the piston and with the connecting rod. But we're starting to get it to move. Like I said, this is the best advice I could give for anyone that's in this situation before you resort to cutting it off. Depending on how long this takes me to get this one out, I'll make an update and add it to the end of this video. But start off, in most cases, the 3/8 inch all threaded rod. Get you about 4 nuts in case, and try to get grade 8 if you can, but you will strip some nuts out, there's a good chance. But most times this 3/8 will work. This one, it's just being a little bit more stubborn, so I had to go up to the 7/16. But a lot of forums online will basically say you need to cut it off or you need to replace the crankshaft, because if it's stuck in there, then it's probably done damage to the crankshaft. But ignore all those forums. Don't get scared. Like I said, I've done this on at least 10 to 12 different bikes in my years that I've been working on them. And whenever you get the wrist pin out, there will probably be like a little, I guess I wouldn't call it scarring, but like a little bit of like marring or scarring, I guess you could call it, on the inside of that connecting rod. And what you want to do is take your new wrist pin and see if it'll fit. Odds are it's probably going to be tight. And so basically what you want to do is you never want to force it in there. That's how we end up in this predicament to begin with, is that someone takes a cheap quality piston and wrist pin and it already fits in there a little bit tightly, and they, you know, force it in there, and when the metal heats and expands, then it gets stuck like this. So what you want to do is you want to take a Dremel or even just some sandpaper with your finger and just go back and forth, and just clean up the inside of that rod. But don't get carried away. Keep test fitting, like lube up your wrist pin a little bit, your new one, and just keep test fitting it, and then just get it to the point where it just fits in there nice and smooth but snugly. Obviously you don't want to go too far, and then you're getting into the point where you'll have to replace your crankshaft. This is just an opportunity to still save it. I've never had an issue with doing this in the past. Like I said, you just Dremel that out, like I said, or just take a piece of sandpaper and just keep cleaning it up, and you'll get it nice and smooth on the inside. Your wrist pin will go in and out easy. Put the bike back together and it'll run great. You'll never have any issues, and you don't have to worry about removing the motor, splitting the cases, and doing all that. I know a lot of the forums are scary and what people say, but obviously these are people that don't have experience with doing this exact thing. And like I said, I've done this quite a few times for me to be giving you this advice. But yeah, this is my setup. Obviously you can, you know, change the configuration around a little bit, but as far as like how stuck this one is, where I'm at now, it's basically, if this doesn't get it all the way out, it's cutting it off or then going and replacing the crankshaft. But I think we've gotten some movement, so I think we should have pretty good luck with this. But yeah, before you resort to the worst case scenario, go to your local Rural King or hardware store. They'll have all thread. Get you some 3/8, maybe some 7/16 like what I'm using for backup. Go to the hardware aisle, go find you some nuts that fit on there. Like I said, get at least 4, because there's a good chance that they could strip out. And then basically just find you some old sockets or something to use to push up against that wrist pin. Like I said, a 13mm fits perfectly, probably a 1/2 inch would work as well. And then find you something to push up against that side that can catch the wrist pin, and you should have pretty good odds of getting it out. That's all for this video. Hope this helps you guys, and let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Leave me a comment.